To order if we could. All right, excellent. Legislators, let's stand for the pledge, and Legislator Boykin lead us in the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll stand for just a moment for a minute of contemplative silence for our great country, its people, and those serving it around the world. Thank you. Clerk, please take attendance.
Majority Leader Borgia.
Here.
Minority Leader Tester.
Here.
Mr. Boykin.
Here.
Mr. Burrows.
Here.
Mr. Gelfarb. Mr. Harcum.
Yep.
Mr. Jenkins.
Here.
Mr. Maizano.
Here.
Ms. Marcotte.
Here.
Ms. Parker.
Here.
Ms. Perez.
Here.
Ms. Shimsky.
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Here.
Ms. Spreckman. Ms. Williams.
Here.
Mr. Williams.
Here.
Mr. Chairman.
Present.
Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Excellent, thank you. We have special orders before us this evening. Two. Would the clerk please read each item?
Item 6572 from the Committee on Rules is a resolution delegating to the Chairman of the Board the power to appoint necessary board employees other than the Clerk of the Board and the power to perform administrative duties related to board personnel.
We have two co-chairs of rules for this item. I'll call on Legislator Borgia, Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the resolution that the Rules Committee took up 2 meetings ago, appointing the delegation of powers for this term to the Chairman of the Board, as is the Board of Legislators' usual practice and in our habits of self-governance here at the Board of Legislators.
Excellent. Any discussion, comment at this time? Mr. Jenkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to stand and speak on this item. The item itself is a routine matter for the Board of Legislators and certainly would go pro forma. The issue at this time, Mr. Chairman, is the right of this legislature. I know that that we have had the privilege over the years of overing items as members of this legislature. Mr. Maizano, our vice chair right now, but then minority leader, took great pains over the last term to admonish legislators for scarfing at the ability of a legislator to over an item. I think the term Mr. Maizano said it was unprecedented, and he suggested that the legislator who was bringing that forward, who was no longer a member of our legislature, so it's not really important. But the fact of the matter was that that legislator was disappointed that her item was overed by a member of this legislature. And quite frankly, Mr. Maizano's point about the respect that the legislators, each legislator, is due in this chamber, specifically on any of the items that come before it, and utilizing their right to over an item to the next meeting, should not be looked upon lightly, and it certainly should be respected. With that said, Mr. Chairman, I certainly look at this resolution, again, as a pro forma. But exercising the rights, Mr. Maizano said loudly and clearly that the rights of us as elected officials and members of this great body should never, ever be looked upon and just skirted around. When we have the administration or anyone else to skirt around the laws that this body adopts, I would expect for each and every one of us to stand and vigorously fight to ensure that those rules are being followed to the letter. So at this time, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this item. Having this meeting called, special meeting, and my honorable colleagues on the other side of the aisle made great comments and concerns about meetings being called for special meetings for basically not really special purposes from a person's point of view. This particular item, certainly, Mr. Chairman, did not require us to come out and be delayed for another event that I believe that many legislators would love to go to. But at the same time, it is certainly your right and privilege as chair to call a special meeting. I think, again, that the legislature and the changes that we have made in legislation, specifically the Board of Acquisition and Contract, was a direct result of actions like this, when an emergency meeting was called within 24 hours of the board overing an item. I'm just hopeful, Mr. Chairman, that this is a one-time event and that will continue on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for your thoughts. Mr. Mazzano.
I just wanted to thank Legislator Jenkins. I didn't realize he was so impressed with all my speeches of the last term. And I'm glad to see that you're now quoting me and relying on my guidance and my leadership. Thank you, Legislator Jenkins. I didn't know I had that kind of impact on you, but I'm so pleased that I could touch you in that way. Thank you.
Any other thoughts? Otherwise, seeing none at this time, ask the clerk for a long roll call.
Ms. Borgia.
Yes.
Mr. Testa.
Yes.
Mr. Boykin. Yes. Mr. Burrows. Yes. Mr. Harkam.
Yes.
Mr. Jenkins.
Yes.
Mr. Mazzano. Yes. Ms. Marcotte. Ms. Parker.
Yes.
Ms. Perez.
Yes.
Ms. Shimsky.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Ms. Williams.
Yes.
Mr. Williams.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Approved 15-0. Item 6574 from the Committee on Rules is a resolution amending titles and salary ranges for Board of Legislators personnel.
Legislators? Otherwise, Jenkins, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This particular item, I know that one of the things that I'm hopeful whenever legislators use their power to over things, it's for a reason, it's rationale, it's not just because. And with the purpose of over and always was to get additional information so that we would be able to have as much concrete information before us before we took on any item. This particular resolution has a pay plan amendment for the Board of Legislators personnel. And certainly, I believe that, I know that I asked to see our board allotments from a budget perspective versus what are the plans for those specific individuals. Not just the dollars in the title, but also the specifics around that, as we all should have the ability to see prior to this particular vote. I just need to be clear on this particular item as well. I understand that there has been assertion that there hasn't been a raise for our folks since 2010, and I would love to correct that. Our staff, the great staff on the Board of Legislators, all who we would agree are the greatest staff, the greatest group of individuals, making sure that this board works every day, since all of us are mostly part-time, to make sure things that happen. There has not been a raise for those levels of individuals from 2007, not 2010. In 2010, we made modifications for 3 positions in 3 levels. For those folks to be clear and to go back to the record on it, in 2009, in December of 2009, we eliminated a job title, which was the Chief of Staff to the board chairman. And that particular position at that time paid $156,000. And that was eliminated in the December 19th pay plan amendment from 2009. In 2010, and I love my honorable colleague, Mr. Mazzano, who always makes sure to keep us in check, right, on these particular items. In 2010, we had a pay plan amendment. And that pay plan amendment was to adjust the salaries, and from my perspective, Mr. Chairman, and this is your view right now, for those individuals who happen to be women that were the leaders on the floor, or clerk of the board, whose salary was cut down from the previous male clerk of the board by, I believe, about $20,000. She'll correct me if I'm wrong. So we were making adjustments for the clerk of the board and the deputy clerk to put those positions in line. The third position was of the chief of staff. And the chief of staff position from going from 118 that it was moved back to from 156,000 a month before, budgeted a month before, to go to, I guess, $135,000. I'm not quite sure of the number. But that particular resolution, Mr. Chairman, had a great path. That path on that legislation came to this floor on February 1st of 2010, and it was recommitted. It was recommitted by me because members of our caucus, members of this legislature, asked for us to take some additional time to review the items as I've asked this evening. And then it came back on February 22nd at a regular board meeting. And at that regular board meeting, Mr. Mazzano overed the item to the very next board meeting, which was March 1st. Mr. Chairman, all of these particular items, specifically on this one, I believe that we need to have some additional scrutiny to understand exactly the ways that this is going to map according to our budget that was adopted. I believe that the plans are not sinister. I believe that in good intent for all of the staff of the legislature who has not have a raise since 2007, for those legislative aides whose salary was fixed at $50,000 or a maximum of $50,000 in 2007. I think that's a lively debate that we should have in conjunction with the charter responsibility to review the salaries of the legislature, which would not go into effect if there is a change until the next term. I believe that those things should be worked on together. I believe that we should have a full accounting of those scenarios, and I believe that that was why I asked to have this particular item overed, to be able to have that additional information and not have to do that on the floor of the legislature. I believe that we should have that opportunity as legislators. I believe the public has the right to ask those questions to understand exactly how those plans are. But more importantly, for us, being the fiduciary folks that are supposed to watch the administration and how it executes lines in the budget, I would hate to be in the side on this particular matter that suggests that we would be doing something that we would ask the administration not to do. We would not ask the administration, we have called the administration on the carpet for hiring people that were above and beyond the appropriated personnel that was adopted by this board. We have called the administration on the carpet for not following the budget guidelines in overspending or moving dollars around in those kind of areas. And I know you, Mr. Chairman, from your days as budget chairman as well, would insist that we made sure to have all that backup information before we made a decision, even at the magnitude for ourselves. So it's not a question on whether or not our folks deserve a raise. They absolutely deserve a raise. The question is us making sure that we're following the processes and procedures to ensure that there is full accountability, full transparency, and a map that what we expect the other 5,000 people in Westchester County government to follow. That said, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this issue, but again, I asked respectfully that this particular item was over to our next meeting to gather that information. I did ask, as I said, the clerk of the board to send all of the personal transfer forms, the PTFs, that have been done from the beginning of January to now. I have not received those as of yet because, I'm sure there's processing that has to go on. I asked early this morning, so whether it's 11:30 at night or 12:30 in the morning to have that information, it would take time to gather that stuff. So again, Mr. Chairman, because again, there is not, from at least one person's position, there is not a great rush to move this particular item today. We should certainly have the deliberations that this body has asked for in the past. And again, from our history on pay plans with this particular item and your leadership in various items on pay plans in the past, to ensure that we had some level of consistency through this process. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very good, thank you. Any other comments or thoughts? Mr. Mazzano?
Yes, thanks. I just, once again, glad to see I was quoted by my friend Legislator Jenkins, and once again, serving as a mediator to him over the past 4 years. I'm glad whatever help I could give you, I appreciate it. However, I just want to say this. This isn't exactly rocket science, okay? We had for every cycle, we have kind of a schedule of employment positions and the range of salaries. All we've done here is modify a few, some minor changes here. This doesn't need a big, task force or a charter revision commission to take a look at a very simple concept. The Board of Legislators has positions and a salary range. The leadership of the board had a meeting, reviewed some minor modifications to those positions and the salary range, and that's it. There's no reason for some big exploratory committee here. It's right before you. Minor changes, mostly what we've been doing going back a decade. It's not that different, and that's why I think this board is fully prepared to vote in this item tonight. Thank you.
Any other comments or thoughts? Otherwise, at this time, clerk, long roll call.
Ms. Borgia?
Yes.
Mr. Testa?
Yes.
Mr. Boykin?
Yes.
Mr. Burrows? Mr. Harkam?
Yes.
Mr. Jenkins?
No.
Mr. Mazzano? Yes. Ms. Marcotte? Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Ms. Perez?
Yes.
Ms. Shimsky?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Williams? Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman? Approved 13-2.
Excellent. No further business before the board. This time, we will, forgive me, Mr. Williams?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I just want to stand to put for the record, I believe that my colleague, Legislator Jenkins, is absolutely correct with respect to a member's right to over an item. I believe what a statement is a statement of consistency. And I believe that all legislators here probably do and should support a member's right to override without explanation. And so I want to say that, to just echo to you that those sentiments are sentiments that clearly are sentiments that we've heard from the time I've been here in this chamber. And I think that those sentiments are going to continue, that the legislators who decide to override an item, while others may be disappointed, and we have often disappointed when an item is overridden, but nevertheless, we stood by the principle that that legislator has a right to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams, and just an extra comment on my part as well. As long as I've been here and through the history of this legislature, the right of a legislator to express themselves on this floor is as etched in our rules as the towns and cities behind me. So I think to a person, we respect that right. We might disagree on what is said. That's not relevant. The ability of a legislator to express themselves, in this case an overage, is certainly well within their prerogative, and no criticism from this chair and from any member in this legislature. They have the right to express themselves. And that is a right that's embodied in our rules. So we will move forward. And as a legislature, we have many more issues ahead of us and many good days ahead of us. And this time we have our special meeting of Wednesday, January 29th, 2014 behind us. Call on the leader at this time to...
At this time, I make a motion that we adjourn to our next meeting on February 10th, 2014 at 7 p.m.
Roll call. Second, first, roll call.
Ms. Borgia?
Yes.
Mr. Testa?
Yes.
Mr. Mazzano? Yes. Mr. Chairman?
Aye. Very good. We are adjourned. A little better.